Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Aquarium Online Academy. My name is Amanda, and I'm coming to you live from the Aquarium of the Pacific in Long Beach, California. And I'm so excited that you decided to join us today as we explore the world of plankton and maybe some jellies. But before we get started today, I wanted to invite you to join along and participate with us by texting the number that you'll be seeing on your screen. So we're going to bring that up for you in just a second. It'll be right across the bottom. But if you would like to participate and text in any questions or observations that you make, please use the number here at 562-286-1838. And we would love to have that feedback during our program. If you're watching this at a later time, you are welcome to use the email address. You can email us any questions at live@lbaop.org, and one of our educators will get back to you when they get a chance. So, having said that, I want to introduce our topic today. We are going to be exploring the world of plankton. Now, plankton and jellies we've talked about, but let's kind of put jellies on hold for a second as we just talk about the word plankton. And I'm really curious to know what some of you already know about plankton. What comes to your mind when you think about plankton? What have you heard about it? How do you define plankton? What is it? Do you have any examples? I'm going to give you some time to go ahead and text your responses in to that number on the screen, 562-286-1838. And my friend Miss Taya is in the studio with me, and she is going to be looking at those responses and then relaying those to me so that we can all be sharing together and learning from each other as we explore the world of plankton. So if you have any thoughts on what plankton is, and maybe if there's a teacher, if there's a classroom that's doing this together, if the teacher would like to text those into us, we would really appreciate it. And then we'll explore together. So right now, I mentioned I'm in a studio. It might look like I'm in an exhibit right now. This is a webcam from our Blue Cavern exhibit. And we have kind of a cool view. We're up at the top looking down into the exhibit. So you can see a lot of cool animals in here. We have some fish. There's a shark. We have giant sea bass. We've got some cool animals, some up near the surface, some down below. We've got some kelp in here. I wonder if we have any plankton in here. What do you think? Do we have plankton? Can you see any in here? Well, we have a nice view to enjoy while you're thinking about plankton. So what have you thought? What things have come to your mind when you think about the word plankton? What do you think? Do you have any ideas? All right, maybe we can start with, I'm going to take you into a different habitat. So here we have our kelp forest, but we see a lot of the fish swimming around. Maybe in a moment we can look at a different kelp forest, and I want you to tell me what you notice about the habitat and if you see any plankton in it, because there's something significant that I want to point out about this next picture of this habitat. So we're going to go ahead and bring that up just a second while you're still thinking about plankton. All right, let's look at this habitat. This is a kelp forest, except this is a real kelp forest out in the natural habitat versus the one that we had on our webcam from our exhibit. But do you see any plankton in this video? Well, what is plankton? I guess that's what we need to start with. Let's try to define what plankton is. I'm curious to know, do you think plankton is a plant, or do you think plankton is an animal? Or could it be both? And do you see any in here? Well, what are the things that you're noticing? Well, I'm noticing some seaweed. It's kind of hard to miss that. And I said it's a kelp forest. So that seaweed that you're looking at is kelp. So this is all giant kelp that is in the water. But what are some other things that you notice? Do you think that giant kelp is plankton? Well, no. Giant kelp is not plankton. It's very large, very obvious to see, but it is not plankton. But is there anything else that you're noticing? Well, I'm looking at this water. I don't see a lot of really big activity, but do you see sometimes when the light's hitting just right? In fact, if I mention light, look at all the rays of the sun that are coming in here. That's a very important thing too. So we've got the rays of the sunlight coming into our kelp forest. And then do you see kind of these specks and some things? I think there are some maybe smaller fish and some smaller organisms in there. What about plankton? Is plankton small or is it large? So we've got two questions we're thinking about. Is plankton an animal or plant, or both? And is plankton small or is it large? Well, I've told you that one thing, the giant kelp here is not plankton. But are you thinking that plankton's small? Many times it is. So how small does plankton get? Could you see it with your naked eye just looking at this? I'm not necessarily noticing any plankton, but just because I can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. In fact, plankton is so important as part of the food chain. In fact, what part of the food chain is it, if you think about it? Well, it's at the very bottom. Now, things that are at the bottom of the food chain, we call those producers. Things that are producing their own food. That's the very bottom. Now, producing food has to do with energy and how energy is moving through an environment. And if we look at the sun, guess what? That sun is the most important part of the food chain because it is sending light down into the water where these small plankton called phytoplankton are able to capture that sunlight and they can produce their own food. So there are types of plankton called diatoms that we can look at if you were to look under a microscope. So it's very, very small. You can't see it just with the naked eye looking in here, but there are little tiny plankton called diatoms that are creating oxygen. They're producing oxygen. They are producers, and they are going to be eaten by other things. Can you think of anything else that might eat a little plankton in the water? Wait, so does that mean we defined plankton? Is plankton a small plant in the water? Well, it could be. They can be plants. They can look like this. Look at this. This is pretty crazy looking. This is a close-up view of some plankton. Now, that looks kind of weird, but these are actually kind of these really like crystal-like structures here, and then they've got these other structures kind of coming off of them. So this is one type of plankton, and right now the name is escaping me, the type of plankton it is. Yeah, I don't remember. I want to say it's like something that starts with a CH or something. I don't remember exactly what it's called. But yes, this is a type of diatom, a type of phytoplankton or plant plankton. So not all plankton, though, is plants. Some plankton can be animals. And those animal plankton, what do you think those animal plankton eat? If they're small little organisms, what do you think they're eating? They're eating these small little plant organisms. So you've got phytoplankton are the plant plankton, the very basis of our food chain in the ocean. And they might be eaten by larger plankton called zooplankton. Zooplankton are the animal plankton. So the animals are eating the small plants, getting the energy from the sun. And these are some pictures of some zooplankton. This is a video of some little tiny plankton moving around. This is from under a microscope. Do you notice if they all look the same? What differences do you see between these? Do you see any size differences? Do you see any shape differences? Do you see any color differences? Now, what you're looking at is just like a drop of water. There's not, or okay, maybe a few drops of water. And actually, it looks like in this video that someone probably just added some more water with a pipette and it made it all kind of swirl around. So what we're looking at are little tiny animals. That'd be hard to see with the naked eye. But you know what? I actually got some plankton here. And I went to a special area at the aquarium where we grow plankton to feed to our other animals. So we set as a basis of the food chain, so we do have animals that eat plankton. Now, right here, I have a little container. You can see my hand, and this little container is pretty small, but it's got a weird sort of color in it. Well, that color that you're seeing in the water are little tiny brine shrimp. So brine shrimp are these little tiny guys, and I'm going to pour a little bit of this into this petri dish that I have here. And let's see if we can zoom in and get a closer look at them. So you can see they're moving around in that water. Wow, is there a lot there? Were you surprised? Because at first it just kind of looked like some orange water, but let's get closer. Whoa, we just got really close. What do you see? What kinds of things are you noticing? I think this is pretty fascinating. I'm noticing some really interesting things. In fact, I'm noticing some different shapes because not everything I see is the same shape. Some things are kind of moving around, and I'm seeing shadows. So what's really interesting to think about is that I'm using a little petri dish, which is clear, and I'm using water, which is clear. And then inside that petri dish and that water, we have these little tiny plankton. And the plankton bodies are actually kind of clear as well. They have this sort of, well, if you think about a shrimp, shrimp have this outer layer to their body, an exoskeleton, but it's actually a pretty thin layer, and it's kind of clear. So it gets removed a lot of times when we eat the plankton or when we eat shrimp, we take off that outer layer. Well, these are little babies that are still developing, and they don't have a really hard outer shell, but they do have this sort of clear shell to them. So we can actually see right through it. And it's hard to pick up on a camera that is looking through a clear sort of structure. But what's really neat is we can see the shadow because this is just a really small bit of water. And so it's raised up a little bit from the bottom and it's creating a shadow as the light hits it. So we can see the shadow of their whole body. So where is this crazy looking animal? We see it looks kind of big on top and then kind of more like a tail at the bottom. But these other things that you might think look like little fish or look like little pencils going through the water, well, those are the baby brine shrimp. But what we can't see are all the clear structures on the outside. Oh, and hello to the 5th graders from Overland Avenue Elementary that are watching. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I hope that you are thinking of some things, noticing some things, and can text in any questions that you might have. Do you find this fascinating? I think it's fascinating. I'm also noticing some shapes that are a little bit different. So we see the long, skinny ones, and we know that those are the baby brine shrimp. But then did you see these circles? Oh, there was one over here. Now, it might look like those circles are moving, but there's actually nothing on their body that's pushing them through the water. So these are just little circles sitting in the water that are being moved around by the water movement around them as these baby brine shrimp are moving. But notice that I said baby brine shrimp. And babies can come either born live or babies can hatch out of eggs. Well, what do you think baby brine shrimp come from? Do you think they're born live or do you think they hatch out of eggs? Huh. Have you thought about it? Do you have an answer? Well, they actually hatch out of eggs. And now that I said that they're babies and they hatch out of eggs, does anyone have any guess as to what these structures might be? What are these round balls, do you think? Well, you're probably thinking the same thing I'm thinking. Those are the eggs. So these are the eggs, the little capsules that baby brine shrimp either just hatched out of or maybe that there's still some in there. I think these have all hatched out, but if you see some that are especially dark, maybe there are some baby brine shrimp still in those eggs. So this is what we feed to some of our animals. Can you think of any animals that would like to eat plankton? Well, again, these are pretty small. Remember how small this was in comparison? We zoomed in really, really close. Let me zoom back out again. Wow, there's a lot of plankton there. Now, this is just a drop of water. Oh, okay, more than one drop, but not much. And this is my hand. So what we're looking at are all of these plankton. We'll let it focus. I'm getting closer. Now do you see more of those dots? Do you see those dark circles? Now we can spot them a little bit easier. And we can kind of watch how these animals are moving. What do you notice about their movement? That's actually one way that scientists can help identify the different types of plankton that they're looking at, is they can look at how they move. Would you say that these are gliding through the water? Would you say they're kind of jumping sporadically? In fact, do you see anything that would indicate how these animals are moving? What parts do you see on their body? Can you tell in these shadows? Maybe we'll zoom in a little bit more. Yeah, so they have little tiny legs and fin-like projections from them that might help them to move about. And they kind of jump about from one spot to the next as they move around and as they grow. And we will feed these to some of our filter feeding animals. Can you think of any animals that might filter food? Oh, sure. Oh, we have another picture, a big picture of a brine shrimp that Miss Talia can bring up and show us. I found another thing I want to show you. So this is what you're looking at. So this is as they've gotten a little bit older, and you can see that color a little bit better. But this is a little baby brine shrimp. You can see they have that long kind of tail at the back and a little bit more, all these leg-like projections coming out from their body. Those are their legs. And you can see their two little eyes right there. But what would eat a brine shrimp? Well, this is one animal that is a filter feeder that could eat brine shrimp. This right here is what? You know what this is? It's a clam. Yeah, it's a clam shell. Now, this is just the shell of the clam. Normally, there'd be another one on this side. But a clam is a filter feeder. So they sit on the bottom. They bring water through their bodies, and they filter out any plankton in the water to be able to eat. So plankton is a really important part of the ocean food chain, because then that clam might be eaten by other animals, like, some flat animals that are relatives of sharks. Do you know what animal I'm thinking of? They love to eat clams. They have special teeth that will grind and crush those hard-shelled animals to get the clam on the inside. I'm thinking of stingrays. So stingrays are long, skinny, or they've got these flat bodies. They live on the bottom of the ocean where clams also live, and they can crush those clams. You think of any other animals that might eat plankton? Well, one of the reasons we grow a lot of live food here, a lot of baby brine shrimp, is to feed to our sea jellies. Our moon jellies will also eat brine shrimp. Now, there's also some really, really big animals in the ocean. Here's a picture of one of our stingrays, and there's the mouth right on the underside here. Now, this ray, this is a cow nose ray. They have these really special flaps up here. They call them cephalic lobes. And these actually, or the cephalic lobes only on the top, I don't remember now. But these flaps will help guide their food into their mouth, and their mouth is right there. So their eyes are on the top. It's hard for them to see what they're eating while they're swimming over the top of those clams in the bottom of the ocean. But can you think of any other bigger animals that might feed on plankton? Jellies right here are feeding on plankton. So moon jellies can capture the little tiny plankton, like little baby brine shrimp, right in their tentacles and bring them on up to their mouths where they can eat. But there's also some other important parts. We said they eat, and where does your food go when you're eating? It goes right to your stomach. And what we're looking at right here, these little circles, or they look like flower petals, are the stomachs of sea jellies. So what's really neat about watching moon jellies eat is you can see the color from the plankton go from the ends of their bodies all the way up here to eventually see it in their stomachs. So a sea jelly, a moon jelly that has just finished eating, will have an orangish, pinkish color to their stomach, because we're actually able to see the food inside their stomach as they're digesting it, which is pretty amazing. So that's kind of a neat thing to look for on moon jellies and other jellies, but moon jellies in particular, we can see them right here at the aquarium. In fact, we might, I don't know if we have pictures of video of our moon jellies, or is it only the sea nettles? I'm not sure what we have right now. I think at one point we used to be able to watch the moon jellies swimming. Yeah, just the nettles. Okay, I wasn't sure if we had anything else. But really interesting animals. Are jellies considered plankton? We know that jellies eat plankton, but are they plankton? Okay, I'm going to ask you, wherever you are, if you're in a classroom, go ahead and raise your hand if you think that jellies are plankton. Do you think jellies are plankton? Go ahead, look around. All right, put your hands down. How many of you think, no, jellies are not plankton? They eat plankton. There's no way they can be plankton. They're too big. All right, look around. All right, put your hands down. My next question is important. My next question is, how big do you think plankton can be? Do you think plankton is always microscopic, or could it be bigger? Could it be as big as me? What do you think? I'd like everyone, wherever you are, if you're with somebody else in the room with you, go ahead and show them. How big do you think plankton can grow to be? Is it like between your fingernails big? Or so small you can't really see it, so it's like your fingers are together? Or do you think maybe it could be about this big? Or do you think maybe it could even be as big as this? Or maybe some of you are saying, nope, I think it's this big. Anyone think it's as big as you? All right, look around, get an idea. Now I'm going to tell you that plankton can be as big as In fact, it can get even bigger than me. So not all plankton is small. Not all plankton is microscopic. Sea jellies right here are a perfect example of plankton. You might be thinking, what? How is that possible? Well, plankton is defined not by their size, but plankton is anything that's drifts at the mercy of the ocean's currents. So anything that can't swim against an ocean current is considered plankton. Isn't that crazy? So that means plankton can be really big if it's not strong enough to swim against an ocean current. And while we watch, maybe we can pull up one of our webcams of jellies swimming. Even though jellies can kind of swim, you might see them kind of pulsing their bell. They have the ability to swim. So it's not that plankton can't swim. And we looked at the plankton swimming in our little petri dish. They can swim. They can move around. You can see our jellies here are moving. But the thing is, they're not strong enough swimmers that they can swim against a strong ocean current. So if an ocean current comes along, guess where those jellies are going? They're going wherever the ocean current takes them. So they can't swim away. That's why many times you don't see jellies just by themselves in the ocean. Usually there are other ones around because as they grow, they're all going wherever the ocean current's taking them. So if the ocean current is going one way, and that's where they're all going to end up going. So plankton can't swim against an ocean current. So it doesn't have to do with their size. In fact, the largest jelly is the lion's mane sea jelly, and it can have tentacles that are as long as 100 feet. That is really, really big. So look at these. Look at these long tentacles here on these sea nettles, and look at how they swim. Are there any questions that come to your mind as you look at these? Are there any things you're wondering about as you watch these jellies move through the water? Do you think that all jellies eat plankton? Or do you think that maybe they could sometimes eat other things? Oh, and someone asked a great question. They said, what do brine shrimp eat? And so let's think about it. If they're really, really tiny, they would have to eat something really, really tiny too, right? So what would be smaller than plankton? Well, maybe a different type of plankton, because we know that plankton can be different sizes. But remember, we talked about the phytoplankton too. So we also raise phytoplankton at the aquarium. I don't have any samples to show you, but we raise algae so that our other animals can eat it. And phytoplankton, so our little zooplankton can eat it. The zooplankton are the animal planktons. The phytoplanktons are the ones getting the energy from sunlight and producing their own food and providing themselves as food to other animals. So I'm glad, though, you're thinking about what eats plankton or what they're eating, because we know that jellies can eat baby brine shrimp, but not all jellies eat baby brine shrimp. Some will also eat fish. Some have much stronger tentacles and much stronger stinging cells to help them hang on to that food and bring it on up to where their stomachs are. In fact, do you think it would be a good idea if you were out in the ocean, you saw a jelly to go on up and touch it? Say, oh, there's a jelly, let me go pet it. No, obviously not a good idea because they have stinging cells all over their body. It could make for a very unpleasant experience. Now here at the Aquarium of the Pacific, we have a touch pool where you can touch moon jellies like the ones we were looking at earlier. And that is safe because the moon jellies do not have a strong sting. And also their tentacles are very short. Remember how we looked at those sea nettles that were floating through the water and they had those really long, beautiful tentacles? They kind of had that orangish color to them. Well, moon jellies are all clear and they have very short tentacles. The tentacles are the part of the jelly that's located around the outside circle of their bodies. We call that the bell. You might wonder, well, why do you call that a bell? That's a weird name. But if you were to look at a picture of a jelly from the side of it, it might look kind of like a bell. You kind of see, if you use your imagination, see a bell shape. There's like that bell, and then this would be like the part that would swing back and forth making the noise. And so someone thought this looked kind of like a bell, so they called this part right here the bell. Now here, it's really nice. You can see the differences in the colors. So you see these long things hanging down here that are kind of these red, I guess kind of a reddish color, orangish color in this picture. And then do you see those lighter things in the middle? The lighter color, that more yellow color, those are something else. Those are called their oral arms, their mouth arms. So they use the tentacles here to sting and grab their food and bring it on up to their oral arms, where then they can bring it on up to where their stomachs are and be able to eat. So it's pretty interesting different jellies have different types of stinging cells and different types of tentacles. Some have really long tentacles, and then some, like the moon jelly, actually have really short tentacles all around the outside edge of their bell. They almost look like little eyelashes, wispy eyelashes. And they don't have a very strong sting because they're not having to grab big fish that are swimming through the ocean. All they have to do is manage to get out some of those little teeny tiny dots, those little tiny plankton from the water. So they don't need strong tentacles. They don't need long tentacles to do that. So that's why it is safe to touch those jellies that we have here at the aquarium. But the interesting thing is that jellies don't have a very long life cycle or a long lifespan. Think about how old you are. However old you are a lot older than any jelly because jellies usually live for 1 season, not even 1 year. Most jellies only live for a season, like a spring season or a summer season, and then they die. Now, there are some jellies, we can actually keep our jellies here alive longer than that. We give them just the perfect conditions to grow in. So you might have some that are over 1 year old, but for the most part, they only live for about 1 season, just a few months. So you have a lot longer lifespan than a jelly does. So jellies are a type of plankton. We looked at some really tiny brine shrimp that are plankton. We talked about jellies eating plankton, but then did you think about any other animals that eat plankton too? We talked about the clam that can filter out plankton, but do you think of anything really big? What's the biggest animal in the ocean? What kind of animal is it? You can go ahead and shout it out. Oh, I think I heard some of you say whales. And yes, the blue whale is the largest, but there's also other whales that can filter out plankton. Now, they're not necessarily filtering out plankton that is this tiny, but they could be filtering out plankton like smaller fish, because fish can start off life as plankton too. And they could also be eating krill. So krill is a little bit bigger than the brine shrimp that we were looking at, but it's like a little tiny shrimp. It's maybe about this big. And these whales, like humpback whales, eat them by filtering out water with something like this. This is what we call baleen. So this baleen, it hangs down from the roof of the whale's mouth, and it has these jagged edges to it that kind of filter out the food. So the krill gets stuck here, and the water gets forced out through these plates of baleen. So this would be the part you were to see if the whale was to smile. This is kind of a side view of how it would look like in their mouth. This would be the part that faces on the outside of the whale's mouth that you were to see if it was to smile. And then this would be the part that would be on the inside, rubbing up against the tongue of the whale. So all they do is they take in this giant gulp of water with all this little tiny krill in it, and then they have this throat area that can expand out to be really, really big. Then they kind of close their mouths and then force all the water out through these plates of baleen. Here, maybe I'll bring it a little closer so you can get a good view of it. So this is the part rubbing up against the whale's tongue. This is the part, see how it looks like a little accordion, like these little tiny spaces here. These are all individual plates of baleen. And the water would be forced through here. The krill would get stuck in all these feathery edges. This is the same material that your fingernail and your hair is made out of. This part looks a little bit more like the fingernail. This part looks a little bit more like the hair. And then that water comes out. The krill gets stuck. They take their big old giant tongue, wipe it off, and swallow it. And that is how a whale is able to eat plankton. And here we have a great picture of a humpback whale. And you can see the plates of baleen hanging down from the roof of its mouth. And you can see these lines. Do you notice those lines right there? Well, these are their throat grooves that they can expand out, or these big pleats that can balloon out to carry all that water. And you can kind of see they would extend all the way down here. So if this whale was eating, it would look like a big balloon underneath their body as they're carrying and holding all that water with the krill in it. So plankton are really important. They have the basis of the food chain, not just for other plankton, but for many animals in the ocean, and also to us. Because every time you take a breath, some of that breath is being produced by phytoplankton in the ocean. Remember that picture of the kelp that we saw earlier, and we saw the rays of the sun that were coming through? Well, all the phytoplankton, all the plant plankton that was in that water was taking energy from the sun, and it was producing oxygen. And the oxygen wasn't just staying in the water, it also leaves the water and goes into the air so that we can breathe it. So it's really great. It is really important that we have a lot of plankton in the ocean so we have all this wonderful oxygen that they produce for us. They are great. They're performing a great service for us being in the ocean. And here's a few other pictures of different types of phytoplankton. Well, I hope you have enjoyed learning about plankton with me and that you appreciate these sometimes unseen parts of the ocean that also produce a great service for us, providing oxygen and providing, if you like to eat seafood, well, you can also thank some plankton for that, because those things that those animals are eating probably started off eating something like plankton. So gives you something to think about today. I hope you've enjoyed being with us, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Goodbye, everybody.